Detroit, Michigan, infamous for crime, unemployment, bankruptcy, a city with thriving industry, endless opportunity, and a renaissance in the arts. The land that changed America, the land that changed the world. This is becoming Detroit. King Louis XIV was a lavish leader. During his rule, France became the fashion center of Europe. He and the French aristocracy popularized wearing furs, so much that the rest of Europe was unable to keep up with the demand. Antoine de la Cadillac, a French military leader stationed in New France, returned to France to pitch to King Louis XIV and his naval commander his plan to establish a fort to trade in the Straits of New France. On July 24, 1701, Cadillac and his team began construction on Fort Pontchartrain du Détroit, or in English, Fort Pontchartrain of the Straits. Detroit sat along the straight body of water on the pathway from the Atlantic Ocean to the Mississippi River, the edge of the current United States of America. This narrow and defensible location was the perfect place to monopolize the fur trade already established by the native people. In the 1850s and 60s, Detroit's rebellious spirit made the city a pivotal player as part of the Underground Railroad. Codenamed Midnight by Underground Railroad conductors, Detroit's unique geographical location became a gateway to freedom for the runaway slaves making their final passage across the Detroit River to Canada. Detroiters of all colors and backgrounds worked together, often in violation of federal law, to coordinate the escape of freedom seekers. Historians estimate as many as 45,000 runaway slaves passed through this gateway. The legacy of freedom is a vital part of Detroit's history. On March 7th of 1896, a huge change came to the manufacturing industry. Charles Brady King drove a horseless carriage down Woodward Avenue. Less than 3 months later, on June 4th, 1896, Henry Ford drove his horseless carriage down the same avenue. Over the years, these men, along with Walter P. Chrysler, William C. Durant, the Dodge brothers, and the Fisher brothers, had a hand in creating a booming automobile industry that propelled Detroit in becoming the manufacturing capital of the world. Henry Ford's innovations in manufacturing propelled the automotive manufacturing industry. He installed the first assembly line on December 1st, 1913, reducing the amount of time it took to assemble the Model T from 12 hours to 2.5 hours. By June 4th, 1924, the 10 millionth Model T rolled off the Highland Park assembly line. In 1940, with the influence of the auto industry, Detroit became the fourth largest city in the nation, falling only behind New York City, Chicago, and Philadelphia. In the 1940s, the first ever urban depressed freeway was constructed to connect Highland Park and the other parts of Detroit. Jobs were expanding so rapidly that around 400,000 people migrated to the city from 1941 to 1943. The Motor City was a powerhouse. During World War II, Detroit was a key player in the arsenal of democracy, retooling the automotive plants to aid the Allied powers. Post-war, construction of an extensive freeway system around Detroit and the higher demand for new housing stimulated suburbanization, and businesses also began to move to the suburbs. Poor public transit and a growing metro area resulted in many jobs beyond the reach of city-based low-income workers. In the 1950s, Detroit held roughly 1/2 of Michigan's population. Over the next 60 years, Detroit's population fell to less than 10% of the state populace due to the people and jobs moving to the suburbs, where now more than half of the state's population lived. Detroit's tax base had evaporated. Then came the riot in 1967. Can you imagine? It was a hot, steamy Sunday morning, July 23rd, 1967. We're standing on the site of what was called the Economy Printing Company, owned by Walter Scott II. By day, it was a printing company. By night, it was a blind pig, an after-hours establishment for gambling, for illegal drugs, for alcohol, you name it. At that time, Negroes or blacks, they couldn't go downtown. They couldn't go to various establishments. So they came to the Blind Pig. There was a party going on for some returning Vietnam veterans that Saturday night. By 3 o'clock that morning, the place had been staked out. The place was raided. 85 people were arrested. As the people were being arrested, Walter Scott III threw a bottle, a rock at the Detroit police officers' cars. By 5 o'clock that morning, about 500 people were on this site because they were trying to find out what was going on. By 8 o'clock that morning, 3,000 people had gathered, and they started rioting, they started looting. And it wasn't because the Blind Pig was raided, but the people felt a sense of powerlessness. They felt racism, they felt discrimination, they felt some things that really sparked them to say, you know what, we have to do something different. This is where it started right here at 12th and Claremont. By Sunday evening, the riot could not be contained by the Detroit police or the state police. By Monday afternoon, it couldn't be contained by the National Guard. Mayor Jerome Cavanaugh of Detroit, Governor Romney of the state of Michigan, and President Lyndon Johnson eventually had to call in federal troops to stop the riot.
As Governor of the state of Michigan, I do hereby officially request the immediate deployment of federal troops into Michigan to assist state and local authorities in reestablishing law and order in the city of Detroit. I am joined in this request by Jerome Cavanaugh, Mayor of the city of Detroit.
The federal government should not intervene except in the most extraordinary circumstances. The fact of the matter, however, is that law and order have broken down in Detroit, Michigan.
5 days of rioting, 43 people killed, 1,600 buildings destroyed, $132 million worth of damage. When you live in New Orleans, you talk about Katrina. This was our Katrina. This event changed Detroit. It changed how the world looked at our city. Yes, Detroit was the city that put the world on wheels. Yes, Detroit had the first highway system. Yes, Detroit had the first paved road. But the riot of 1967 changed how everybody looked at the city of Detroit. After the riot, Detroit was known for violence, crime, and urban decay. So, where do we go from here, Detroit? In 1827, when Detroit's leaders discussed a city motto, they knew it was destined for struggle. They settled on Spire meus meliora resurget cineribus. We hope for better days. It shall rise from the ashes. And now, like a phoenix, we have risen from the ashes as the world-class city that Mayor Dennis Archer envisioned back in the 1990s. Mayor Cavanaugh would be proud. We have become Detroit. We are Detroit.